All right, we're going to learn about volume of a rectangular prism. You've learned volume is V equals LWH, or volume equals length times width times height. So if we were doing this, it is the length times the width times the height. So I'll multiply this times this times this, and that will give you the volume of this shape. Okay. Another possible way of thinking about this is volume is equal to area times height. We know length times width will give you the area. So if they've given you the area of, say, this, they've said the area of this is a number, then we would just multiply this times the height. There's two different ways to do this, depending on what they give you. Okay, so we're going to do the most basic one first, using volume equals length times width times height. So let's just give some numbers in here for time being. So let's just say that this is 10 inches. This width is 3 inches. And this height is 5 inches. So we're going to use, we have a length, a width, and a height. We're going to use volume is equal to length, width, height, because that's what they've given us. So my length is 10 times my width is 3 and my height is 5. So I have to multiply 10 times 3 times 5. 10 times 3 is 30. So 30 times 5 will give me my answer. 30 times 5 is 150. In this case, it's volume, so it's inches cubed, because I'm multiplying 10 inches times 3 inches times 5 inches, inches times inches times inches, 3 inches. So these are the easiest case scenarios when they give you length, width, and height. Multiply the three together, and they will give you the volume. Okay. Now, sometimes they might give you a area. So let's just say that they give you the area and say that area right there is, say, 8 inches squared, and they give you a height of 5 inches. Okay. So if they've given you the area, they've in a sense given you length times width, because length times width is area. So if we're going to do this, instead of multiplying length times width, we already know what that is. In this case, it's 8. So we can look at it like this. Volume is area times height. Volume is 8 for the area, and the height is 5. So 8 times 5 is 40 inches cubed. So anytime they give you an area, they're essentially giving you two sides of the volume, the length and the width. And depending on how you turn it, anything could be the length and the width. So you just have to multiply the area times the third side, and you will get it. Okay. The final type problems are going to be something that's a little bit new. We're going to be using fractions to do these. These are a little advanced, and I highly recommend going to your Khan Academy lessons, because they're going to give you another video on how to do these. Okay, so let's look at this, and I'll do a couple for you. Okay, so we want to find volume, and we want to know how many 1/2 unit cubes can fit in this prism. Okay, so in order to do this, I need to give it some dimensions. Let's give this a side of 4. This will be a side of 1, and this height will be a side of 3. So if we're going to find the regular volume, 4 times 1 times 3 is 12. Okay? But we don't want to know the volume. It says how many half unit cubes can get there. So a unit cube is one of these things with all the sides being a half. So we're going to see how many halves can go down this side. So each cube going in there, a half, a half, a half, a half. We want to find out how many halves can go into 4. Well, a half and another half gives me 1. So 2 halves make 1. So if 2 halves make 1, I'd multiply that by 4, and 8 halves would make 4. So I have 8 halves can go into the length. How many halves can go into the width? Well, it's 1. How many halves can go into 1? 2. Okay. And we have a height of 3. How many halves can go into 3? 6. Because half of 6 is 3. So I can make 8 cubes going this way. I can have 2 rows going back. So 8 rows there, 2 rows there, and I can stack them 6 on top going up. So my volume is the number of cubes is 8 times 2 times 6. 8 times 2 is 16, which I have 8 cubes going this way and 2 rows that way. 2 rows of 8 is 16, and I'm going to stack 6 of them on there. So 16 times 6 is 96. In this case, I didn't specify, so it's units cubed. Basically, you want to find out how many halves, because it asks for half, go into each one of these sides. If it was thirds, you'd say how many thirds go in here. In this case, this right here is 1. How many thirds go into 1? 3. So this number would have been a 3 if I was asking for thirds. Okay. Going to our fourth example. Our fourth example says, find the volume of this rectangular prism. Well, we might need some information. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information here to get going with this. We'll have this bit of information up here. Say area equals 4 centimeters squared. So I've given you an area and the height. The height is going to be, and not a very good writer with this yet. Hard to write clicking with a mouse. 1.5 centimeters. So what we want to do is we want to find the volume of this. So I'm going to use volume. I've given the area, so I want to use this. Formula volume is area times height. So 4 times 1 1/2. Okay? In order to do this, remember, we have to do something before we can multiply fractions. We got to make this a mixed number into an improper fraction. So that becomes a 2 plus 1 is 3. So that makes that 4 times 3 over 2. So my volume is 4 over 1, which is 4, times 1 1/2, which is 3 over 2. So I get 12 over 2. 12 over 2 is 12 divided by 2, which is 6. So I have 6 centimeters cubed for my final answer for this one. And again, when you're multiplying by fractions, make sure you change your all your fractions into improper fractions before you start multiplying. Okay? And our fourth example, or our fifth example in this case, says how many 1/2 units can fit in a prism whose area is 10? So how many halves can fit in this thing if the whole volume is 10, should be cubic units instead of square units. But we're not going to worry about that right now. So let's just make dimensions of a cube with or a rectangular prism who has a volume of 10. So what times what can give me 10? 10 times 1 times 1. Length times width times height gives me 10. So this would have a volume of 10. Now, they already told me that though. I want to know how many half units can get in there. So how many half units can get into that 1? Well, 2 halves can go into a 1. 2 halves can go into a 2. And how many halves can go into 10? Well, 20. So 20 times 2 is 40, times 2 is 80. 80 cubes can go in there. Okay, now let's just do this again and choose something different. We're still going to get a number of 80. Okay. Okay, let's look. We have area of 10. Let's just say I called that 5, that 1, and that 4. Oops, in that 2. This still gives me an area of 10. 5 times 1 times 2 is 10. So how many halves go into 5? Well, 10 of them. How many halves go into 1? Well, 2 of them. How many halves go into 2? Well, 4 of them. Okay. 4 times 2 is 8, times 10 is still 80. So it doesn't matter how you divide that up as long as you get a volume that equals 10 in this case. I strongly recommend going to Khan Academy and watching their lessons. They will do it, and I guarantee they write a little bit better than me. And they'll go through this step by step. It'll be good to see it from a different point of view. Again, always, if you have trouble, give me a message, and I will do my best to help you out. Thanks.